The title of the presentation today is about the history and the culture of Roma. And I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here today to be with you. And I'm really so nervous now when I see so many people. And perhaps you have very high expectations that I can solve all the problems which you have with Roma. And maybe I will give you the right directions and instructions what to do in your working with Roma. But unfortunately, I am not a magician, although that the Roma can do magicians. I am not able to do that. So what I will try to do is to give you some background information about Roma, and why I will try to explain why the Roma today are like this, what we see in Germany, very often coming from East European countries, sleeping on the streets and in the parks, what brought them to Germany and why they left their countries, East European countries, mainly Bulgaria or Romania. And I will try to explain also why it's not good to use the word Zigeuner, and instead of that we should use the word Roma. Very often the people ask me, but what is wrong with the word Zigeuner or Zigan in East European countries? It is so nice, that word, it sounds so beautiful, Zigeuner. And there are reasons why we should not use those kind of words, but before getting to those details, maybe I should start with some introductory background, and this is the following. So as you can see, and from many historical books and also from linguistic books, we know that Roma are coming from India. So you can see here that this is India here, and on the end of the 9th and the beginning of the 10th century they started to move Indian territory, and they started a journey which brought them to a Byzantine Empire, and after that they were spread all over Europe and all over the world. But why these people came to Europe to disturb us? Why they didn't stay in India? Why they didn't do their job there? What happened to them that they left India? Yeah, there was a war, and the war was between, as you know, in northwest parts of India, somewhere here, is the territory of nowadays Pakistan. But in that period, when it was on the end of the 9th century and the 10th century, the two countries were not so divided. So there were attacks from the Muslims, the nowadays Pakistani people, to Indian territories, and these territories here are actually two states which are called Rajasthan and Punjab. So nowadays Roma coming to Europe, to Byzantine Empire at the beginning and later to Europe, are actually from these two parts of India. At the beginning they were not Roma, they were not Zigeuner, they were not Gypsies. They were groups, Indian groups, speakers of different Indian languages and dialects. Nowadays in India there is no such a thing like Romani language. Actually, Romani language developed and was created during the road from India to Armenia, and in Armenia they met first time the Christian religion. Before that, here in India, they had different religion, different languages or dialects, and different culture. This is why today we have so many different groups of Roma. We have Roma who are musicians. We have Roma who are, in the past they were, what is called that, snake charming. But nowadays there are no snakes in Europe, and this is why they started to do something else. For example, horse trading. Or they were metal workers. Even today in India there are groups which are metal workers. So these people were nomad people in India because they were belonging to different groups, and in order to sell their products they had to travel from place to place in these two states. But when the war started, they had to escape from the war. And some of the people escaped to the southern part of India. This is normal. But some of them who were on the borders with nowadays Pakistan, they had to leave the country. It was easier to leave the territory of Rajasthan and the territory of Punjab. So then when they started their journey from India, and this took something like 150 to 200 years before they arrived to Byzantine Empire, and here is the Byzantine Empire, they started somehow to communicate between themselves. So in nowadays Romani, actually, we have words from Sanskrit. Even today, when you hear someone who is speaking Romani, there are words from Sanskrit, there are words from Prakrit. This is the, let's say, grandmother, grandfather of nowadays Hindi. This is the name of the language, Prakrit. And nowadays Hindi. If you are a speaker of Romani, if you know well Romani language, and if you go to India, there will be no problem for you after 1 week to start to understand what the people speak about and what they are talking about. Because in nowadays Romani, 70 to 80% of the words are from Hindi language. But this what changed was the syntax. So the sentences. Usually in Hindi, the verb should be on the end of the sentence, in the last position. But because in their journey from India to Byzantine Empire, they were in contact with many languages. They changed somehow the structure of the sentence, the structure of the language as well. So the biggest influences were from Armenian language, and even today in many Roma dialects there are words from Armenian language. And the second big influence was from Greek language. And actually the Roma spent some 150 years in the Byzantine Empire. And in this place, in the Byzantine Empire, they got for the first time, the name Atsinganoi. And from the word Atsinganoi, we got the word Tsigan, Tsiganin in Bulgarian, Tsigane in Serbian, Tsigani in Russian, Tsigoiner in German, or Singare in Swedish, Zingari in Italian. So in all these languages, actually the etymology is coming from the Greek word Atsinganoi. Why is not correct to use the word Tsigoiner? Why is not good to use the word Tsigoiner or Tsigan? It's very simple. In Byzantine Empire, the word Atsinganoi had the meaning of someone who is dirty. And if you get in touch with that dirty person, you will be also dirty, polluted. So actually the word Tsigan, Tsigoiner, means someone who is dirty, with whom you shouldn't get in touch. This is very, very dangerous. I mean, that in the Byzantine Empire, the people had this meaning that they are, gods, Zeus, Apollon. They are the Greek people with that perception that they are supermen, superwomen. They had all the goddesses there. The god Diana, the god, I don't know which, so many goddesses in the Greek mythology. But when they saw these strange people, and why they were strange? Because they had very strange way of dressing, which was not known in the Byzantine Empire. And what was their clothes? Their clothes were the clothes of Indian people. The women are with saris, with long skirts. The men had their different way of dressing, not like the men in the Byzantine Empire. And the second thing, they were doing professions which were not recognized, not known in the Byzantine Empire. And for this, the Byzantine society was thinking that it is very dangerous to be in touch with these people because they are so strange, so dirty. They are doing things which are not known to us, the members of the Byzantine society. So this is how they created the word Atsinganoi. And from that word we got the Zigeuner. But actually what the meaning of the word Roma is, there is a scientific explanation about this. In Indian languages, there are, maybe I should show you the second map. In Indian languages, there are consonants which are combination of two consonants or three consonants. And the linguists who are Indologists or interested in Indo-Aryan languages and did a lot of research on Romani, they found that actually the Roma are coming from a group which was called, now be careful, there is a consonant which is combination of D, R, and L, drom. So when they started their journey, they belonged to that group which name was drom, whatever. So they came through Iran to Armenia. And in Armenia, they were separated into three waves. I will come back to this map again. One of the waves was going to Arabic world. And today, the Roma people in the Arabic country like Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Israel, they are called Dom. The other group which continued to Byzantine Empire, they are called Rom. And the third group which went to Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all these ex-Soviet Union countries, they are called Lom. So there are three names of the same people depending on this where they live. So these are Lom in Central Asia, Dom in Arabic world, and Rom in Europe, and later on in United States and in Australia, because some of the people from Europe emigrated to United States, Canada, and Australia. But the first biggest publication which came was in 1842, 1843 by an Austrian researcher whose name was August Pott. So he published a book about the language, and he showed actually there in that book that the people in Central Asia, in Arabic world, and Roma people are coming from the same places in India, in Rajasthan, and in Punjab. So, what made the Roma people to move from the Byzantine Empire? in the Byzantine Empire, it doesn't matter where they were going, actually they were not accepted. They were traveling and doing all kinds of professions in order to survive, but this was not possible, so they were trying to move to different places in order to get some profession and some work and some normal living. And after the Byzantine Empire, the next biggest empire in this region, in the Balkan countries, was the Ottoman Empire. So in the Ottoman Empire, they had the freedom to move in all the countries which were in the Ottoman Empire. And actually, the countries which were in the Ottoman Empire were Bulgaria, Romania, part of Yugoslavia, so even part of Austria and Hungary. So in these countries, actually, this was the Ottoman Empire. Maybe I should show, yeah. No, this is the Byzantine Empire. So you can see how big was the Byzantine Empire, everything which is in red. So they had the possibilities to move here, but they didn't have such a big movement. The biggest influence on Roma from the Byzantine Empire is on their language. But together with the language, a lot of things from the Greek culture influenced the Roma culture. For example, how nowadays the Roma do when someone dies, what they do and how they do it. These are things which comes from Byzantine Empire, from the Greek culture. And in Turkey, nowadays Turkey, but in the Ottoman Empire, the Roma women were much more doing musical, and not only the Roma women, but also the Roma men. They were musicians. And together with my students from the Free University, who are students in Turkology, we tried to do research on different issues on Muslim Roma in Balkan countries. So this is what we found, that one part of the Roma were working like musicians in the Ottoman Empire's army. So they were making the music in the Ottoman Empire's army in this period. So there are also some influences from Ottoman Empire, from Turkish language on Roma language and Roma culture. But the biggest influence is that Roma had to change their religion in the Ottoman Empire. Why that happened? Because those who were Muslims in the empire, in the Ottoman Empire, they didn't pay taxes. So if you were nomadic Roma and have a Christian name, which is a name from Greece, from Byzantine Empire, then you have to pay taxes. But if you are Muslim Roma and you get settled, you don't have to pay taxes. So this was the system of the Ottoman Empire, an empire which was very much reliant on the taxes which they were collecting from all the places. So the next very important country in the development of the Roma is Romania. Why? One part of the Roma who were crossing Romania, which today is called Romania, but during that time this was not one country, but actually two countries, Moldova and nowadays Romania, were the same country, and this was called Vlachia. The Roma were kept there as slaves. One part of the Roma who are coming from Romania nowadays, their grandparents were slaves in Romania. What it means to be a slave in Romania during that period? So what were the measures which the Romanians were taking to the Roma? One of the measures was that Romani language was forbidden. If a Roma man was catched speaking Romani to his wife or his children, then his tongue was cut. This was one of the measures. Today, in Romania, there are a lot of Roma who don't speak Romani. They have the features of Roma, but they don't speak Romani. So what happened to the Roma in the Austro-Hungarian Empire? There was another empire in Europe. And the measure which there was a queen whose name was Maria Theresa, and the measures which she was taking towards the Roma was that if a Roma child is born in a Roma family, the child is taken from the Roma family and it is given to Hungarian family, where the child was growing up without knowing his parents, without knowing his past, and speaking only Hungarian language. So nowadays in Hungary we have group of Roma which don't speak Romani. They tell that they are Hungarians, but the Hungarians say to them, Tsigan, you are not a Hungarian, look at yourself. You are so black, so dirty, so, with these features. So these were the measures towards Roma to make them integrated in those societies. There was also something similar done in Spain and in Finland in this period of mid-centuries. We are speaking about the period of between 13th to 18th century. And in Spain, the movement of Roma was forbidden, and particularly towards Roma women, there was a very strong measure, and this was that if a Roma woman is catched in fortune telling, she was put on a fire stick, and she was burned, because the Catholic Church thought that these women who are fortune telling, they are in a combination with the devil. But actually this was one of the professions of these people, because in India nowadays there is a profession which is something like a fortune telling, and the ability of some people to read your palm, to see what happened to you and what will happen to you in the future, and reading the lines on your palm. But the Catholic Church was against that. And in Finland, towards Roma was taken, actually Finland and Sweden during that period was one country. There was no Finland and no Sweden. But towards Roma, in that period, was taken again the measure of forbidding the language and cutting the tongues of the Roma, because they were speaking Romani. Actually, throughout all these centuries, this is what the Roma were doing. They never started a war to fight for their rights. We are here, we have to stay, we have rights to be treated normally. This is what they were doing. When they had some kind of persecution, they were moving to another country, to another place, but not fighting. For the last 1,100 years since they left India, there is no war which Roma started against any country, against any nation. They never attacked another nation. Why it's like that? Are the Roma so stupid that they cannot fight for their rights? Are they crazy? No. This is from the Indian culture, where the people, the Indian culture is maybe the most tolerant culture which I ever saw in my life. Why? Even today in India, if you go, there are 19 official languages plus English. English functions as lingua franca. In India, in one family, the father could be a believer in Krishna, the mother could be believer in Shiva, the son could be believer in Christian, in Jesus Christ. And this is exactly how the Roma family is constructed today. They live together. The families, in the families there is very big respect. Nowadays, the younger Roma started to become arrogant thanks to the contacts with different European cultures, and particularly after 1990s. It's terrible to see young Roma who doesn't show any respect to you. So, but you cannot do anything. This is the democracy. And there are things which remained from Indian culture in the Roma culture, even today. And those things very often are not known. My friend, who has a son who is, I think, 8 years old, was when I visited him in 2003, he made an arrangement that his son will marry the daughter of his other friend. You know that in India there is a caste system. There are 4 castes. So it is very difficult to get married with someone who is from higher caste or from lower caste. You have to marry your caste, the person from your caste. So even if you marry someone from the higher caste, you don't become, you are not member of that caste. You remain still in the low caste. And this guy was having a friend who had a daughter, and they arranged some kind of engagement between the 2 children. I thought, oh, this is so ridiculous. 8-year-old children to be engaged already? And I asked him, look, why you did this? And he explained to me, why not? If the children know each other when they are younger, smaller, and they grow up, and we are in a good relationship with the families, 2 families. Then the children will go to gymnasium, then the children go to university together, and then they get married. This is so natural. They get to learn each other from so early ages. And in Indian community, in Indian society, there are very, very, very few divorced people. And I was wondering, why? Why so little number of divorced people? Because it's very normal. If you grow up with someone and you know him for so many years, you get used to him and you know him so perfectly well that, okay, you can get bored, and you can say, it's enough, too much. One wife whole year, all my life? No, it's better to have second, third one. But this is how the community functions. In traditional Roma families, traditional Roma communities, there is no way that you can get divorced. If you want to get divorced, you don't go to the court and you declare to the non-Roma members of the court, look, I would like to divorce my wife. No. There is a Roma community what is called court, when they will come together. They will listen to the husband, they will listen to the wife. If these Roma, old people, Roma who are members of that community, if they find that this why you want to get divorced is stupid, and now, because you bought us here, you'll get punished. You have to make a big table with good food, and we will eat and drink, but you two go home back together, and you are not getting divorced. You have responsibilities, you have moral in the community, and you have to keep it. It's fantastic, huh? But this doesn't function in other communities and in other families. This is in the traditional Roma. But nowadays, modern Roma like me, they get divorced, they get married, divorced a few times, several times, because it's modern. Yeah, why not? We are modern people. But these are things which remain from the Indian culture, from the time when the people were in India. And there are also some things. Very often the people ask me, why these girls, Roma girls, they don't go to school after 12 years old, and why they get so early married? Why? Because this is what is in the Indian culture. In Indian culture, there is something which is called that the girl, before to go to get married, to go to the house of the boy, she has to be clean, which means that she shouldn't have any sexual contacts with any other boy or man. This is even today in the Indian community, Indian society. It exists. And among Roma, this understanding of the fact that the girl should not have sexual contacts with any other before to get married is very, very alive. If the girl gets married and the family of the boy finds that the girl is not clean, which means that she had sexual contacts with someone else before to get married with the boy, the girl is sent back to the parents, and the parents of the girl have to pay penalty to the family of the boy because they made the name of the boy dirty. This is very, very strict law. So, why the Roma girls don't want to go to school or don't want to go to school? Why the parents don't allow them to go to school after the age of 12? It's very simple. Around 12, the girls start to get the menstruation cycle. They are turning to women. Let's say it in that way. And after that age, they could be an object of interest by some other boys. And it is very dangerous if the girl has a boyfriend who is a non-Roman boy. This is a big shame for the family. So the parents have to do everything possible to keep the girl clean, to avoid any sexual contacts of the girl before she gets married. And very often, one of the measures is that they don't want her to go to school because there are boys, and she can get some contact, some relationship, she could get in love with someone, and let's pray that this one is not a Gajo boy. Gajo means non-Roma. Non-Roma boy, then if the boy is non-Roma, this will be very, very bad for the family, because then the family gets bad name, and the other Roma stop to communicate with them. So there are strict rules which are not known by the majority. Very often the people would think that, well, they are lazy, this is why they don't want to go to school. Or, they are more interested in music, dances, and whatever, which is true. But the question is, how knowing those culturally specific things for Roma to make them interested in school, to continue their education. And of course, there are ways and approaches which could be used to make the Roma girls to finish their education. But for the society, it's much easier to blame the Roma like not interested in education, for example. But let's come back to the history. And something which was happening to Roma, and it is very little known, was in the Holocaust. Perhaps you heard a lot of things about the Jewish people, what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. Perhaps you heard also about the communists or Slavic people in Russia, Russians, Polish people, what happened to them. But very, very little is known about this, what happened to Roma. And actually, the persecution towards Roma started much, much, much earlier. And there is a documentary film which is just 8 minutes. And I have it here. Yesterday we did download that. Yeah. And I would like to show you that film.